In the early 2000s, the gaming world saw an ambitious dream come to life. A crossover so unlikely that it almost seemed impossible. What if the whimsical worlds of Disney collided with the epic storytelling of Final Fantasy? That dream became a reality in 2002 when Kingdom Hearts debuted, merging two beloved universes into one unforgettable adventure. Developed by Square Enix in collaboration with Disney, Kingdom Hearts followed the journey of Sora, a young boy wielding a magical Keyblade as he traveled across Disney worlds to battle the dark forces of the Heartless. With appearances from iconic characters like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Cloud Strife, Kingdom Hearts blended action-packed gameplay, heartfelt storytelling, and a sense of wonder that captured players' imaginations and set the stage for a legendary franchise. Today, we're diving into the origins of Kingdom Hearts, its groundbreaking collaboration, and the legacy it left in gaming. So grab your Keyblade, gather your friends, and join us for today's magical trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 239th episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people who have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby video games a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world and its legacy. Today, we are diving into the enchanting world of Kingdom Hearts, released in 2002. This beloved action RPG brought together the magic of Disney with the epic storytelling of Final Fantasy, creating a timeless journey that continues to capture hearts, worldwide. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who'd probably spend more time arguing with Donald Duck than fighting Heartless. That makes him goofy, by the way. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, do you think you'd be more useful casting spells or just quacking under pressure?
Well, I think I'll have to leave the quacking to Donald, so call me a spellcaster.
You're not a spellcaster if you're goofy, though.
I mean, even a
Goofy-
spellcaster can be a little goofy.
Goofy's... well played. Okay. Well, we both got some really bad jokes in on that one, so I'm going to call that a draw.
You call it what you need to, Dave.
A draw.
Okay. Anyway, I think that people want to hear about our current week in gaming history, don't you, Dave?
Sure, why not? Give it to them. Go ahead.
Well, kicking it off on March 25th, 1994, The Elder Scrolls Arena was released, launching what would become one of the most beloved and influential RPG franchises in gaming history. Developed and published by Bethesda Softworks, Arena was originally intended to be a gladiatorial combat game, but evolved into a sprawling, open-world fantasy RPG that gave players unprecedented freedom. Set in the vast continent of Tamriel, the game featured a massive world to explore, complete with cities, dungeons, and an intricate main quest revolving around the retrieval of the Staff of Chaos to defeat the evil Imperial battle mage Jaeger Tharn. Though its technical ambition led to a rocky launch, Arena earned a cult following for its depth and scale, laying the groundwork for future Elder Scrolls titles like Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim, which would each redefine open-world RPGs in their own right. We learned all about it last year in episode 187, so if you'd like to learn more about the creation of the Elder Scrolls series, go give it a listen.
Yes, we did. It's not originally what you think it should be.
Yeah, like we said.
That's
But
definitely,
go find out more.
Yes, that's definitely a game that the scope of what they set out to do and what they ended up doing changed.
The scope went up.
The Scope went ope, yes.
Next up, on March 29th, 1998, Parasite Eve was released in Japan, blending cinematic horror with RPG mechanics in a groundbreaking way. Developed by Square, the game was a sequel to the novel of the same name by Hideaki Sina and marked the company's first M-rated title in North America. Parasite Eve followed NYPD officer Aya Bree as she unraveled a biological mystery involving mitochondria and spontaneous combustion in a hauntingly atmospheric New York City. Its unique combat system fused real time and turn based elements, while its cinematic cutscenes pushed the boundaries of storytelling on the PlayStation. The game received critical acclaim for its innovation and helped pioneer the survival horror RPG subgenre.
It also has some relevance to today's topic.
Ooh, I guess you'll have to stick around to find out why.
Yeah, teaser, teaser, it'll come up again.
Woo! Next up, on March 27, 2001, Black and White was released, offering players a unique blend of god game mechanics and real time strategy unlike anything seen before. Developed by Lionhead Studios and led by famed designer Peter Molyneux, the game cast players as a deity tasked with guiding and influencing a tribe of villagers while raising a massive creature that could learn behaviors and grow based on how it was treated. The game's morality system was central to the experience, allowing players to choose between benevolence or tyranny, which visibly affected the game world and the creature's appearance. Praised for its ambitious AI, gesture based spell system, and philosophical themes, Black and White pushed boundaries in player agency and emergent gameplay. Despite some criticisms about interface quirks and pacing, it remains a standout title for its innovation and is remembered as one of the most influential God games of its era.
We did a whole episode on the career of Peter Molyneux, at least the early career of Peter Molyneux, in our Fable episode. So if you'd like to learn more about him and how he came to his design philosophies that led to Black and White, go get a listen.
I'll give it a listen indeed. Next up, on March 23rd, 2004, Far Cry was released, marking the beginning of one of Ubisoft's most iconic franchises. Developed by Crytek and published by Ubisoft, the game stood for its impressive open environments, advanced AI, and cutting edge graphics powered by the CryEngine. Players assume the role of Jack Carver, a former Special Forces operative stranded on a mysterious archipelago teeming with mercenaries and genetic experiments gone wrong. Far Cry offered a blend of tactical freedom, intense firefights, and stealth elements, allowing players to choose a combat scenario to approach combat scenarios in diverse ways. Its success not only established Crytek as a major development studio, but also laid the foundation for the Far Cry series, which would evolve into a global blockbuster franchise known for its exotic settings and memorable villains. We covered it back in episode 82, so if you want to learn more about its origins, go there.
Long time ago.
Indeedly do. It was 157 if I mathed.
Math.
Last up for this week in gaming history, on March 26, 2013, Bioshock Infinite was released, marking a bold and ambitious evolution to the Bioshock franchise. Developed by Irrational Games and led by creative director Ken Levine, the game traded the underwater dystopia of Rapture for the soaring steampunk-inspired city of Columbia. Players stepped into the role of Booker DeWitt, a former Pinkerton agent tasked with finding a mysterious girl named Elizabeth to wipe away the debt. Featuring fast paced combat, skyline traversal, and a deep narrative driven experience, Bioshock Infinite captivated audiences with its exploration of themes like American exceptionalism, racism, quantum theory, and the nature of choice. Elizabeth's character development was widely praised, as was the game's jaw dropping ending, which reframed the entire series into a multiversal spanning narrative. Infinite became a commercial and critical success, solidifying its place as one of the most thought provoking first person shooters of its generation.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I guess you can say that eavesdropping, so to speak, led to the creation of the Kingdom Hearts series.
Whatever could you mean by that, Dave?
Someone overheard a conversation, but it wasn't a conversation between just anyone. The initial idea began with a discussion about Super Mario 64. On one end of that discussion was Hironobu Sakaguchi, who we've
Oh.
discussed before in, I would guess, more than one episode. He's one of the more notable game designers to come out of the Square, and we learned about him. He's the creator of the Final Fantasy series. He's the father of the Final Fantasy series. And he has touched, as a director, producer, or executive producer, just about every notable title that has come out of Square in the last 30, 40 years, however long it's been. And on the other end of this conversation was another Square producer, Shinji Hashimoto. Hashimoto joined Square in 1995, and he became the promotions producer for Final Fantasy VII. Good time to join the team, huh?
Absolutely, it was.
Final Fantasy VII is something that we've done a whole episode on, a very fascinating episode that was all around Square's break with Nintendo and how the Final Fantasy came to be on the Sony, right? Because it's a
Right.
PlayStation game, and then their development on the PlayStation. Really interesting story, really interesting episode. I highly suggest you go check it out. But these two were kind of talking about the possibility of creating a game that had the same freedom of movement that was found in Super Mario 64. And they found themselves lamenting the fact that it was probably only going to be characters that were as popular as Disney characters, such as Mickey Mouse, that would be able to rival the popularity of Mario and a new Mario game, right?
Right.
And that's a fair assessment. From We've had this discussion before. From the cultural standpoint, there are few characters that have the recognition that Mario has, right? We've put him up there with Mickey Mouse before. So,
True.
overhearing this conversation, the eavesdropper, so to speak, was Tetsuya Nomura. He was a long-time character designer for Square. Now, Nomura had started working for Square in 1991 as a debugger for Final Fantasy IV. Okay, goes back quite a long way. And after Final Fantasy IV, he worked on many, many, many notable games that have come out of that studio. He was a monster designer for Final Fantasy V. He was the graphic director of Final Fantasy VI. He was a graphic designer for Front Mission. He did field graphics for Chrono Trigger. And we've discussed him before because he played a prominent role in the development of Final Fantasy VII. He was its principal character designer. He greatly impacted the gameplay of the game. It was his idea for the game's stylized limit breaks, which was kind of a thing that carried over into Final Fantasy titles later in some way, shape, or form. They've kind of had that let's make these great combos that charge up type deal. That's what a limit break is essentially, right?
Right.
And he even helped write plot elements. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, spoiler alert, after so many years, when there's a notable scene in the game, one of the main character dies. Anyone who's a Final Fantasy fan knows what scene I'm talking about. And if I'm not mistaken, Nomura was the one who wrote that plot point.
Hmm.
So, very notable figure who kind of came, kind of slowly worked up the ladders, right? And here in Final Fantasy VII, he's a principal character designer. Uh, he also worked on Parasite Eve, which we talked about. That has an anniversary this week. That is a personal favorite of mine in the survival horror genre. He then designed characters and monsters for Final Fantasy VIII on top of writing character backgrounds. I know when we talk about many of these games, we look at Sakaguchi, the father of Final Fantasy, and the superstar of Square Enix, who directed many of these projects, or produced. But it's really hard to imagine his success when you get into the nuts and bolts of things and you look at the teams very closely without seeing Nomura working on these projects alongside him, because Nomura was involved in so many of the other projects that Sakaguchi was involved with too. So I'm not saying that these men were on equal level, but it wasn't exactly weird that Nomura was there overhearing a conversation. It wasn't like it was a new employee who had just come to the table and had no business being in that room that overheard like two of the biggest bosses in the studio talking about a new project. You know what I mean?
Right.
These three men, all three of them in their own respect, were all leaders in the studio in their own respect. And two of them were discussing the possibility of a new project when Nomura overheard the conversation. In a 2012 interview, I found, Nintendo does used to do those Iwata Ask segments when the Nintendo president, Satoru Iwata, before he passed away, used to interview notable figures in video gaming. There's a lot of really fun interviews for that. And later Kingdom Hearts titles came to Nintendo platforms, like some of the handheld titles were on the DS, for example. And so at one point, Iwata did an interview with Nomura. And in that interview, they talked about the origins of the Kingdom Hearts series. Nomura said, I had been called there for some completely different reason, but when I arrived, Hashimoto san and Sakaguchi san were talking about a discussion they had with Disney, having an exchange along the lines of, Mickey Mouse would have been great, but we can't use him. At that moment, I basically put my hand up and said, I want to be a part of this. That's how it all began. But at that point, I really wasn't thinking of making a game that featured Mickey Mouse. So that's all it took, right? He
Yeah.
basically he basically heard an idea and said, "Ding, ding, ding, mine. I'd like to
That's
head up that
wow.
project."
I mean, hey, it worked out, you know?
It did work out because the two guys were like, "Sounds great, you could do it." And when Iwata asked Nomura why he volunteered, he has said, "Well, just as I was working on Final Fantasy VIII, Mario 64 was released. The fully three-dimensional spaces and the freedom you had to run around them had a really big impact on me. When I told my colleagues I wanted to make a game like that, they said, but Mario is already a world famous character. It would be impossible to start from scratch with an all new character." So, again, Hashimoto and Sakaguchi, both kind of the executive producers in the studio, the head of the studios, they agreed to let him direct. But of course, you then have to get Disney's buy in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one would think that that was incredibly difficult. But in this case, it's circumstantially easier because at the time, Square and Disney shared an office building in Japan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So one day, Hashimoto finds himself in an elevator with one of the Disney executives and he just decides to go for it. He says, "Hey, look, guy, we got this idea I'd like to run by you." And he pitches him the idea in an elevator.
Man, that's bold, especially for Japanese culture.
Right?
Glad it
So
worked. Whew.
obviously the pitch went well. And then meetings were set up between Nomura, the team, and Disney. And it was obvious that initially both sides were not on the same page. Nomura said they appeared to believe that we would make whatever they wanted us to make. And they came up with rather specific requests, such as, we'd like the game to feature this character. They were really, really excited explaining their ideas. To be honest, though, I wasn't interested in any of them. I actually stopped the presentation halfway through. We didn't have that much time, and it looked like it was all going to get taken up by various Disney presentations. So I interrupted them, and I told them the conclusion by saying, I won't make such games.
Wow. That's good.
So Nomura followed it up, or so Awada asked Nomura, were they surprised by that? And Nomura said, yeah, they were certainly surprised. However, since I did not understand what they were saying in English, I decided not to care too much about that. And I told him about my primitive idea for Kingdom Hearts. All new characters going on a journey through the worlds inhabited by Disney characters. I visited their place several times after that first meeting. In the first meeting, afterwards, I showed them a design document with a picture of Sora, the main character from the game. I'd drawn him carrying a weapon that looked like an enormous chainsaw. What on what on earth is this? They said.
Wow. That's a long way off from a Keyblade.
A long way off from a Keyblade. It honestly wasn't all bad, as they were putting the concept together, right? The planning of what this game was, what this game was going to look at, like so on and so forth. They had an opportunity, several opportunities, in fact, Nomura said, to speak to the president of Disney. His name was Bob Iger at the time. And Bob Iger was said to be very generous towards the Square team, according to Nomura. He said that even when people around Bob Iger were opposed to something, he'd say it was okay, and we'd be able to move on.
Nice.
So they did their back and forth, right? They had contracts, they had ground rules, which we'll talk about as we kind of look at this development here. And obviously, the team managed to hash it out because they came to an agreement and started work on a new game. Now, development on what would become Kingdom Hearts started in February of 2000 amongst a team between just over 100 people that were spread between Square and Disney's video game studio, Disney Interactive. When the team first started, they were putting together ideas that focused more on gameplay and a story that would appeal more so to Disney's target age range, right? So, Disney traditionally, I think that it's very different nowadays, but let's assume 2000 Disney was really only known for children's movies, right?
Right.
I mean, all their popular IPs were children's movies. Now that's different now. Nowadays they own Marvel and they own Star Wars, and there's a lot of maturity in the Disney library. But in 2000, before
Not so
all of
much.
that, that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, not so much.
So initially, the team kind of went into this thinking, well, if we're going to make a Disney game with Disney characters, it's going to be a children's game, right? We're going to make it a family friendly, all audiences type game. That's the mindset that they started this project on. But Sakaguchi, the father of Final Fantasy, and role playing, games in a lot of respect, because let's be honest, Final Fantasy revolutionized console role playing games in a lot of ways.
Definitely did.
Check out the episode. Sakaguchi, with all his wisdom, basically told Nomura that the game was going to fail if it didn't aim for the same level of maturity and thus gameplay as the Final Fantasy series.
Hmm.
And Nomura took that to heart. He said, you know what? You're right. So, with that in mind, the team started to expand the gameplay and the story beyond that original concept. They started to expand it into more of a children's game to, let's just say, more of a mature role playing game. They changed their mind about the simplicity of gameplay, and then they became, started to develop more complex role playing systems within the game. It was that was one of the decisions that kind of made Kingdom Hearts inevitably not a Disney game, and I would argue it's more of a Square game at this point. As they began to work on the game, of course, first you have to choose what Disney worlds to include in the game. And of course, this was a negotiation with Disney, right? First, that team chose worlds that had distinctly different looks because they didn't just want to, have the whole game look the same. And then they had to take into account, once they narrowed that down, the way Disney characters, are the Disney characters in this world interesting? Because there certainly are Disney characters that, no shade being thrown anywhere. There are Disney characters that just aren't as interesting as others.
True.
In an E3 interview, Nomura was asked about Disney's input into this process, to which he replied, "We actually don't get many suggestions from the Disney side of the project. It's all of us. In this case, we come down to a number of worlds that we want to include in the universe, and then I go out and I list which worlds that we think would be a perfect fit. I take that, I propose that in front of my entire team. Once everyone agrees on the worlds that we think will work, we take that over to Disney, and we have the same discussion with Disney. There have been worlds that have been rejected at that point, but then I just suggest another world or another scenario, and we move on until we get agreement on the entire list." So it sounds like this was kind of I mean, he says, I've seen him say multiple times that Disney was very hands off in the process, but it also sounds like it was kind of collaborative too.
Yeah.
And one I did find, again, kind of confusing because he says a lot of times this was all us. I found on a fan site called Kingdom Hearts Ultimedia, at one point, probably a decade ago, they did an interview with Nomura, and it lines up with a lot of this. When they were walking in the interview through the process of selecting worlds and characters, he mostly gave the same answers. But this interviewer did something incredibly interesting, and he asked him, spoiler alerts, why does Mickey Mouse, arguably the biggest name in Disney, only appear in one scene in the game? It's a fair question, huh?
It's a valid question, yeah.
And Nomura replies, due to contractual issues, we were only able to use him in one scene. And although Disney originally gave us permission for a role such as like waving from the back of a crowd of people in town, we fought and decided to use him in a single shot that would leave the greatest impression. Which is kind of, spoiler alerts, it's the end of the game. Like, hey, we found Mickey. That's how the game ends up. So
Nice.
like that's the climax. We beat the boss. Oh crap, here's King Mickey. We got another quest, guys. Queue up Kingdom Hearts 2. So they did use him for a really great part,
Absolutely.
and set him up in a position where they could negotiate with Disney to use him more, which, as you do get further into the series, a lot more Mickey Mouse. Nomura has said that even though Disney didn't really give them too many limitations, this was likely because the Square team tried to remain in the boundaries he felt were set by each respective Disney film. So I'm guessing part of the reason why they didn't get a lot of feedback is because they didn't really put themselves in a position where it was necessary, right? Because if you follow the rules already established by Disney, you don't ever have to talk about the rules, right?
Right.
It's kind of smart. It's kind of smart. It was smart for them. So if it's not terribly obvious, the name of the game, since we're talking about rules set by Disney, was also inspired by Disney. The theme parks specifically. And I will say, I think when you hear the term Kingdom Hearts, it's easy to assume that the Magic Kingdom lent its name to the franchise. That is, after all, possibly the most well known and popular of the Disney parks. Fair?
I'd say fair.
Would you think the Magic Kingdom when you heard Kingdom Hearts?
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I think whenever I hear it, I assume Magic Kingdom. But Nomura has said that it was in fact the Animal Kingdom, which had just opened, that he had in mind when he came up with the name Kingdom. And at first, that's what the idea was. They tried to actually secure the name copyright and intellectual property Kingdom. That's what they wanted to call it at first.
Just Kingdom?
Just Kingdom.
Huh.
But when they couldn't secure the rights to it, right? Because like there's this general rule that says that like generic words like that are really hard to create intellectual properties around because where do you draw the line? Someone could write kingdom in a book as in like the kingdom of God, and technically there could be IP infringement type deal. Like that's the kind of crap they try to
Right.
avoid, which is why they don't like simple worded IPs like that, you know? So anyway, Kingdom was a no-go. So as the story began to develop and the team kind of conceptualized this idea that hearts were a core part of the story, the team actually decided to combine the two concepts, Kingdom and Hearts, and obviously Kingdom Hearts was created. There were other challenges, you know, throughout the development process that the team had to work on. You know, one was the concept of an action RPG. You know, Kingdom Hearts, for those of you who don't know it, is an action RPG. It is not a turn based RPG like pretty much every other Square game at the time. You know, Final Fantasy are all turn based, front mission, turn based. Parasite Eve was this hybrid that was action, and then the action would pause for the fights type deal. So there really wasn't a team that had experience working on an action RPG at the time. It was a new novel concept. When Nomura was asked in an interview about how many people on the team had worked on action RPGs, he literally replied, "Yeah, no one." So,
Nice.
so this was kind of a concept that they had to develop on their own. You know, as they were looking to bring this idea into reality, the concept of allowing people to move freely in 3D, the team in all reality was really working in unfamiliar territory in terms of action RPG. You know, the 3D concept, they had kind of touched on it with the Final Fantasies at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those were turn-based battles, so bringing all that experience that they had learned moving in 3D and applying that to how can we make the battles real time? How can we make action battles? And then how can we develop role playing systems around that? That was a lot of the challenge that the team had to work on here when they were trying to turn this game into what they wanted to be. We also know of content that for various reasons the team just couldn't work into the original Kingdom Hearts. You know, for instance, they had planned on using a world based in The Lion King, but they were unable to do so in the original Kingdom Hearts because it required additional programming to allow Sora, the main character, to walk on four legs, because the theory was that he was going to become a lion when he visits the world, and they didn't have the ability, time, know how, take your pick, to give the additional programming that would allow it to happen. So a world based in the Lion King was nixed, and I believe that was added to Kingdom Hearts 2.
Oh, nice.
There were also plans to bring Tifa Lockhart from Final Fantasy VII into the game as an optional boss, but that was scrapped because they ran out of time. She was then chosen to be fleshed out as a character and also added to Kingdom Hearts 2. You know, they had all this content that they had to cut, and
Which became the second game.
it a lot of it, yes, a lot of it did become the second game. Some of it ended up in the first game, and we'll talk about that shortly too. So,
Okay.
so as they went along, there were just things that didn't happen, you know. But they did keep working at it, and they chugged along, put their head together, did the work, made a game. The team finished up the game, and it was finally released in Japan on March 28th, 2002. You know, Rob, hearing how Kingdom Hearts came to life thanks to some elevator luck, a chainsaw wielding Sora, and a bold pitch that nearly derailed a Disney presentation is a wild ride in itself.
Yeah. Who knew that one overheard conversation and a lot of guts could lead to one of the most beloved crossovers in gaming history? It just goes to show that great things can happen when you're willing to speak up and take a chance.
Exactly. And if you've ever had a big idea or something you're passionate about, whether it's games, storytelling, or sharing random elevator encounters, starting a podcast is one of the best ways to share it. And Zencaster makes starting that podcast incredibly easy.
All right, hit me with it. What makes Zencaster stand out?
Well, Zencaster is an all in one podcasting platform that lets you record high quality audio and video straight from your browser. No fancy equipment, no complicated setup. Just log in, hit record, and you're ready to go.
That sounds simple enough, but what about editing? I don't exactly have an audio team backing me up like Square and Disney did.
Well, that's the best part. Zencaster's post production tools do the heavy lifting for you. They'll clean up your audio, balance sound levels, and even remove background noise and filler words like and It's like having a sound engineer without hiring one.
Nice. And once I've got the episode ready, how do I get it out to the world?
Well, Zencaster takes care of that too. You can distribute your podcast directly to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more, all from one place. No extra work, no headaches.
All right, I'm sold. How can our listeners get started?
Well, that's easy. Just head over to zencaster.com/pricing, and you can use our offer code, all one word, memory card lane, and you'll get 30% off the first month of any paid plan. Whether you're a first time podcaster or a seasoned pro, Zencaster has everything you need to sound like a Keyblade master.
That's a great deal. So, listeners, if you've ever wanted to share your thoughts, passions, or just start something creative, now's the perfect time.
Absolutely. Head over to zencaster.com/pricing, use our offer code, memory card lane, and you can start your podcasting journey today.
And with that, let's get back to Kingdom Hearts and wrap up the story behind one of the most unlikely collaborations in gaming history.
Rob, there was, needless to say, a lot of hype around this game.
Uh huh.
Do you remember it at all?
The hype?
Yeah, the hype.
Can't
Was that
say
still a
that
little that was still a little too early for you?
I just if I don't know. I wasn't ever into it. I never myself have played through the games. I've just watched my roommate in college play them. It just wasn't for me.
Funny enough, I was in college when the first one came out, so it was probably similar to me.
Nice.
I came out right when I was starting college. Like literally, for America, it was September of 2002. I would have literally had just started. That would have been the month I started college. You know,
Yeah, so you probably played it yourself and were into it.
I was.
So
Oh,
that's a little different for me.
I was on this hype train for sure. You know, this game was announced at E3, and what we were all pretty much told was that it was a game coming. There was a game coming, right? That E3. It was a collaboration between Square and Disney Interactive that was going to feature worlds developed by both companies. And when we started to get other details like the name of the voice actors, they were well-known actors at the time. I mean, they still are well-known actors, but I mean, like at the time, they were. I would argue more prominent than they are now. One of the voices is Haley Joel Osment, the other is Hayden
Oh,
Panettiere, uh,
oh,
and they definitely don't have the celebrity status now that they had at
no,
the time. Like they
not
were
like
big,
that.
big at the time. So, and who is the other guy in there? He's from Seventh Heaven, the TV show. He was well known too. God, I can't remember. Anyway, but then we also started to find out that the voice actors for the characters, like the Disney characters, that they were all going to they were trying to make it as authentic as possible, right? So all the voice actors from your favorite Disney movies were going to be the voice actors for this game too. So I mean, it was becoming evident very quickly that this was going to be the real deal.
Nice.
And like for me, I'm a big Disney fan. I love Disney, and I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan. You know, they had just done Final Fantasy X, was the one that they had come out with before this. Like I know that they started working it after 8, but I'm pretty sure that it was Final Fantasy X and then Kingdom Hearts came out in the whatchamacallit, like, in Square's library. So I was super stoked. Like this was just so exciting to me to get to merge my two of my favorite things, right? Because I was a huge Final Fantasy fan, and I was a huge Square Enix, or I'm sorry, Disney fan, and just the thought of putting them together, I was on the hype train. I was so on the hype train. It wasn't even funny for me. I remember being unbelievably excited for this one. Heck, I'm still excited for a new title in this series. What am I talking about? So, um, even though these stories are convoluted and over the top at this point, I still get a big kick out of watching all the crap they do with the Disney properties. So needless to say, Kingdom Hearts had a lot of steam behind it when it was released. So to no one's surprise, when it finally came out, it sold incredibly well, right?
Right.
It came out in March in Japan, obviously, hence why we're talking about it. But stateside and PAL, so pretty much everywhere else, it was a mid September release. And that made it essentially a holiday product for 2002, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being one of the top selling titles for the entire holiday season, no doubt. I believe it was toppled by Madden, and that was the holiday season that Vice City came out, and
Ah,
GTA Vice City was the best selling game I think that year and the following year. So,
yeah, it was.
yeah, that was a big game there. In fact, I think it came out the same month as Vice City, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe Vice City had an October release because GTA's are normally October. But I mean that it was shadowed by Vice City, no ands, ifs, and buts about it. By April, so that's what, roughly 4 6 months, right? 6 months in. 6 months in, it had sold 1 million copies, and that earned it Sony's greatest hits status. And it's still one of the best selling titles on the PS2, period, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk a little bit about where the series has gone from there, but I would like to point out that the original Kingdom Hearts, Kingdom Hearts 1, has now seen multiple releases, right? And this is when things start to get kind of confusing for a lot of us. They released it, had the original Japan release, right? And then they re-released it, not re-released it, but let's say they released it again, September, North America and PAL. And when they released it to us, it had additional content that was not included in the Japanese release. My guess is the stuff they wanted to include all along, and they just ran out of time to, and it wasn't make or break, so they released it. One of the things that was kind of fun, they ran a contest that was like name a game or name an enemy contest, and the name that won ended up being like a optional or secret boss in the game, and the name was Kurt Zisa. I don't know why Kurt Zisa. I should have looked that up. I'm sure it has some relevance. But Kurt Zisa, they had this game, and re-released it with additional content. Okay.
Okay.
Then it was re-released in Japan with all that content added. The version was called the Kingdom Hearts Final Mix, and they added even more content to that version of the game.
Nice.
So just the original on the PS2 got essentially 3 different versions, each with a little more to it. We didn't see that the Kingdom Hearts Final Mix until the PlayStation 3 era a few years later. They remade it with some graphical updates and some more content and a few other things. But it was called Kingdom Hearts HD 1.5 Remix.
Yep.
Yep.
And it don't get any easier from there.
No, no, it doesn't. No, no, it doesn't. Because there are titles in the series that's like Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop, Kingdom Hearts 358 divided by two. Like Kingdom Hearts. What is the current Kingdom Hearts? They have the entire series right now available to purchase on Steam. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but you can purchase the entire series. It's called the Kingdom Hearts Intergrum Masterpiece. I don't know where they come up with these games.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. It's insane. It's every time I've tried to get into it, I get confused by all the numbers and everything, and I'm just like, I don't care enough. See you, bye.
Fun little fact. I'm staring at the Kingdom Hearts. Well, let me get a little bit into there. So when they remade Kingdom Hearts 1.5 Remix, one of the other things they made is they changed the gameplay to be more like Kingdom Hearts 2, which Kingdom Hearts 2 played a million times better than Kingdom Hearts 1. So they brought that Kingdom Hearts 2 gameplay to Kingdom Hearts 1. It was a quality of life update that was definitely needed, appreciated, so on and so forth, right? Because the battle system in Kingdom Hearts 2, which was way more fluid than Kingdom Hearts 1. So that was a welcome change to the game. In 2016, they re-released Kingdom Hearts 1 alongside Kingdom Hearts 2.5 HD Remix in a compilation on the PlayStation platform. And then in 2019, they finally brought that compilation to the Xbox. So in 2019, they finally found it on a Microsoft platform. And then last year, they pretty much added that to Steam, like that whole Kingdom Hearts library on Steam. So now, I think finally, 22 years later, you can play the whole series pretty much anywhere you want. Like there are Xbox versions and Sony versions and PC versions now. And what I was telling you is I'm staring at the Steam page, the library page, right? Or the store page for the Steam or for Kingdom Hearts. Duh. You get what I'm saying? And it has a flag that says Kingdom Hearts HD because now they sell it as the 1.5 and 2.5 remix is one of the top played games in the Steam Deck. So there you go. Apparently, it's one of the definitive handheld gaming experiences on the PC too.
Well, that's kind of neat.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. Real quick, I think Rob had said he's tried to get into the series many, many times, and it's been difficult, right?
Yeah.
It's a series that very much, I think, plays off itself, and even to this day, I feel, and I know there have been some prequels, so to speak. I think that 1.5, 2.5 remix is a incredibly good beginning for new Kingdom Hearts people, personally. You get the same blank slate that all of us had, and the stories in the original two were more simple than some later ones, and so you get the simplicities that eventually I think the series lost a little bit. So if you're ever trying to get back into it, I would recommend that 1.5, 2.5 compilation package. So
Gotcha.
it's a good place to start. Start with 1.5 HD remix. It's good. So, in case you don't know what Rob's talking about, just a side note before we wrap it up for the day, and you don't really know how much Kingdom Hearts there are currently two new Kingdom Hearts games in development. The last of which slated to come out is Kingdom Hearts 4. But between all those remakes and compilations and prequels and handhelds and mobile titles, which they actually add to the story and everything, Kingdom Hearts 4 will be the 20th release in the
Hmm.
series. So at that rate, there's almost a new Kingdom Hearts title every year in some way, shape, or form.
And they're all interconnected.
They are all interconnected. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that includes like how one became 1.5. So it's a little unfair of a comparison, right? But I
I think
included it
so.
because when one became 1.5, it added more, right? If it was the same game, it'd be one thing, but they kept adding additional content. So technically, Final Mix is its own game because it has more content, and HD 1.5 Remix is its own game because it had even more content. That's why I think it's more fair to say there are 20 releases in the series.
No, I would agree.
But yes, they are all interconnected. They all add something to the story, and There are 20 games to play. Although
Yeah,
you
there's
can
a
knock
whole
some of
ass
them.
world.
There is a whole ass world. A whole lot of Disney worlds, considering that like most of the key games in the series 1, 2, and 3 have like 14 or 15 different Disney worlds to visit on them. So there is a lot. There's a lot.
There is indeed.
Um, but yeah, Kingdom Hearts is still going. It's a fantastic game that started that with just a, I don't know if I'd say chance encounter. I think that, Square Enix at the time was looking to make a game, you know, that was similar to Super Mario 64, but they didn't quite know how to take what they liked about it and turn it into a Square game, so to speak, right? And between that initial conversation and that chance meeting in elevator, the right people were in the right place at the right time to make it happen. You know,
Absolutely. The stars did align.
I think sometimes when the history thrown out there is, oh, someone just overheard a conversation and volunteered themselves. I think it's a little disingenuous, but it's not terribly far from the truth. But it makes for a good story, right? Which is ultimately what Kingdom Hearts is all about. It's all about a good story.
You got that right.
Yes, indeed. You ever plan on playing it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I think you'd like it. I do think you'd like it. I think the action RPG is more your style than turn-based. I don't know that have you played many turn-based RPGs? Yeah, I don't know that to be your style. I think you'd like the action RPG style. The story is fun. It's as cheesy as some of the animes you probably like.
Oh, I enjoyed the story. Like I said, I watched my roommate play through the
True
games.
statement. Yeah, true statement. Have you? How
I,
many of them have you think you've seen? At least the first two.
uh, 3, I think. Wasn't the third one out when I was still in college?
I don't remember. When did the third one come out? Hold on. On the page. I'll look it up real quick. Kingdom Hearts 3 came out in 2019.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's that would have been probably. I was probably watching him play it on um Discord
streaming
at that point. Yeah,
or discard? Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, Kingdom Hearts 3 was 2019. It came out on February 25th, so I'm pretty sure I got it as a birthday present in 2020.
would make
And
sense.
that would have been one of my other lockdown games. But it was a good time. I have no complaints whatsoever. I really enjoy the series, and it was a good start. On its way there were a lot of other stories that we kind of integrated into it. We talked about, for instance, Parasite Eve, and how Nomura had touched all those games like Front Mission and the other Final Fantasies and Parasite Eve on way to making Kingdom Hearts. And a lot of those games we have touched on in other stories too. And so I would encourage our listeners, if you're not a longtime listener, to go back and listen to some of those stories. Final Fantasy had Sakaguchi in it. Nomura came up in the Final Fantasy VII episode. Parasite Eve, we've talked about a few times. It falls in that survival horror genre around when Resident Evil came out. So it's a game I'm fond of. Have been looking to plug in to an episode, but I keep thinking that its release date just keeps getting clouded by other games, which is why nobody probably knows it anyways. That's probably what happened in real life.
Yeah,
But in any case, if you'd like to check out any of these old stories, of course, you can do so by listening to old episodes of ours anywhere you get your podcasts, like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But of course, you can also do so by going to our website, which is www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people do on our website?
you can find a calendar of our future episode topics. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come chat with Dave and I about different episode topics or maybe anything else gaming related. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us and get access to ad-free and unedited versions of all of our episodes. And you can find links to our social media where I can be found on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Each week, we will tell you one story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It could be about a game, technology, a person. It's most often a game. We do it on consoles. I did it on a museum once. I
True,
don't know
he
if I've
did.
did it. I don't know if I've done it on any other odd things before, but we integrate a lot of cool things. Like one of our early episodes has the history of virtual reality. So We use these games as an excuse to talk about a lot of other really cool things technologically wise. Technologically wise, that's great, Dave. You know English. But yeah, so we pick a topic relevant to the current week, we sit down, we research it, we put out an episode. One of the best parts about the whole process is every week when we sit down to do research for a new episode, we learn things. That's why we're here. That's why you're here, I'm assuming. That's the most fun. When I learn something new, I get excited and I get to teach it to all of you via this podcast. And that's my favorite thing. It's a great cycle of teaching, learning, learning, teaching. And in celebration slash recognition of said cycle, we like to talk about our takeaways each week. So, Rob, what did you learn today?
Well, I learned all about Kingdom Hearts, Dave, but I think my favorite thing to have learned has to be also the simplest. The fact that it was just a chance elevator meeting after an overheard conversation that it just it all just worked. It's crazy how sometimes things just work out like that.
It's a true statement. We've
And
heard that a lot about games, right?
yeah, it's always fun. I say it every single time. It's just crazy how often that happens.
Right.
And I mean, literally to be in the same building,
Here's
like
here's an elevator ride. Here's a car ride. Here's a chance dinner meeting. Like it, we've heard that there have been so many like really notable games that just came together because two unlikely people got put together for a random reason and started talking and it was like that's a great idea. Let's do that.
yeah, just
Uh,
it blows my mind every time.
I mean, it just goes to show you if something's meant to be, it's meant to be. It's going to happen.
True. Very true.
So
So, what about yourself? What is your takeaway of the day?
it's so simple, but I like learning that Kingdom Hearts was Animal Kingdom and not Magic Kingdom because I always assumed it was Magic Kingdom. Makes more sense as Magic Kingdom to me, but Animal Kingdom had just opened and that was the thought.
You see, it's funny that you say that because you say like, "Oh, it makes sense to you" and stuff, and like I don't. When I thought of it, I never even thought of Magic Kingdom or anything. I just thought like Kingdom Hearts. It's its own thing, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of always thought that the two came together because, again, like, all these Disney theme parks are kingdoms, in some way. Animal Kingdom and Magic Kingdom being two of them. Although the other two are Epcot and Hollywood Studios. I guess that doesn't fit. But, like, to me, Disney World is the Magic Kingdom. Like, when I think about Disney World, I think about Cinderella's Castle. And Cinderella's Castle, for those of you who don't know, is in the Magic Kingdom. So, like, that is the epitome. Like, that's the essential that's the essential Disney theme park when it's in my brain, basically.
Gotcha.
And I guess I just I always put it together. It was kind of neat learning that that wasn't the case. So there was a lot of fun stuff about here. I'm with you. I mean, it was fun learning about the chance encounter that made this happen. And it was fun thinking about, I never really thought about the fact that this was one of Square's first action RPGs. You know,
True.
it makes sense that 3D wasn't a new thing because, again, Final Fantasies, had been coming in 3D, but they had never done an action RPG. And now even Final Fantasy is an action RPG series. So it's kind of crazy to think of this is where it started, right?
Right.
This was the first one. This was the first action RPG and that just started a trend. This started the trend. I mean, action RPGs weren't even a major thing before Kingdom Hearts, not only for Square but for anybody. This really started the trend of making action RPGs popular and mainstream, period. Period. If you think about it.
Yeah. No, you're right when you think about it.
So anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Just so you know.
Okay, Dave. Weird way to put that.
All right, Rob. Well, before I take it into next week, is there anything else you'd like to add to today's episode?
As always, I'll just take a quick moment to say thank you so much to all of our listeners for joining us on our journey as we learn about our love of video games. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, our love of video games. That's what we're learning about.
Yeah,
Our love of video games, for sure.
I mean, it is.
We love video games.
We do, and we get to learn all about them.
We do. We do.
See? Yeah, twist of the words. Make it work.
That's a wrap, Rob, on our magical journey through Kingdom Hearts. This unlikely crossover brought together worlds and fans in an unforgettable way, blending action, adventure, and heartfelt storytelling. Whether you wield a Keyblade or just like revisiting your favorite Disney tales, let the legacy of Kingdom Hearts remind you that friendship and courage always prevail. That is so cheesy, and it would so fit as dialogue inside Kingdom Hearts.
Yep, you got it right there, Dave.
I sure did. Next week, we are trading the magic of Kingdom Hearts for the hard hitting, beat dropping action of Def Jam Vendetta.
Ooh.
Released in 2003, this bold fusion of wrestling and hip hop brought iconic rappers into the ring for an unforgettable underground showdown. Join us as we explore the story behind this genre blending gem and find out why throwing punches to the beat is the ultimate mic drop on next week's electrifying trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Skibbity bop 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 boo.